Now what I'd like to do is show you how to use the Explore analysis in SPSS to check the assumptions for the analysis that you will conduct. To do that, I'm going to use the data that we'll be using in this course. And one of our first assignments is to work with the math achievement data. You can see this column of data here. So we want to look at the characteristics of that data. So we'll go to Analyze, Descriptives, and then to Explore. Now we have a couple options here. We can look at that data by itself, or we can look at it by group data. So for example, let's say we want to look at the math achievement scores by gender. So we can put gender in the factor list, and then we can move the math achievement scores into the dependent list. The next part that we want to consider is the statistics. Now, we don't really need to check anything here except to make sure that descriptives is checked, because we will get all the information that we need in terms of the descriptive characteristics for this data. In terms of plots, one of the things I like to do is uncheck stem and leaf and look at the histogram data. I think it has a little more meaning to it. The other thing that I like to check is the normality plots with tests. The normality plots are not as important as the tests, which are the tests that tell us whether our data is significantly skewed or peaked. And then we'll go to Continue. And then in terms of options, there's really no options that we're going to consider at this time. Now we can go and make sure that in the display area that we're going to have both our statistics and our plots. So now we can go OK. Now we see that the first thing we want to check is to make sure that we have the number of males and females that are in our data set. So we should know that ahead of time, and then we want to make sure we check that to see if it agrees. Notice that you have the mean and the standard error. You have the variance, the standard deviation, and then we have the values for skewedness and kurtosis. And what we do to determine if our data is significantly skewed or is significantly peaked is we divide the standard error into the statistic value. If the value exceeds plus or minus 2, then we know that we have significant skewedness. We do the same thing for kurtosis. We have the same values available for female. We also see that we have our tests of normality. We have the Kolmogorov-Smirnov and the Shapiro-Wilks test. We most commonly use the Shapiro-Wilks test when we have values above, or numbers in our data set above 30. And you can see that these values, 0.129 and 0.254, are non-significant because they exceed 0.05. Then we have the histogram for the math achievement test. And you'll notice that we have histogram by gender. So this is the histogram for the male math achievement scores, and this is the histogram for the female math achievement scores. And then we see that the normal probability plots, if you have these observed values in a linear pattern, then we can say that our math achievement scores are not significantly skewed or peaked and are relatively normal for males. We have the same situation for females. So really, these are the highlights or the most important pieces of information that you'll want to review to determine if your data meets the assumptions of normality and heterogeneity. Normality and heterogeneity.